We've got a great program for you today with Los Altos Vice Mayor Jonathan Weinberg. Let me start by introducing our guest. Jonathan was elected to the Los Altos City Council in 2020 and is serving as the city's vice mayor in 2023. Community involvement has always been an important value for Jonathan. In 2015, he was appointed to the city's Park and Rec Commission, where he served until his election to the council. Jonathan and his wife, Edith, moved to Los Altos in 2009. Their son, Noah, is a sophomore at Los Altos High School, and their daughter, Emma, is an 8th grader at Gideon Hosner Jewish Day School in Palo Alto. A Bay Area native, Jonathan was born and raised in Oakland. He attended college in Southern California and received his law degree from Hastings College of Law in 2001. Jonathan has practiced law for more than 20 years and is now a partner with the law firm of Finkelstein and Fuji in San Mateo. Hopefully I pronounced that right, Jonathan. His practice focuses on real estate law and trust and probate law. An avid fan of the Oakland A's, or is it the Las Vegas A's? We'll find out, I guess. Jonathan enjoys going to as many baseball games as he can. He also enjoys traveling with his family, listening to music, and has recently started to explore the world of bourbon and other American whiskeys. Please join me in welcoming Los Altos Vice Mayor Jonathan Weinberg this morning.
Good morning, and thank you very much for the invitation to be here.
Great. Well, thank you for making time. I know as a practicing litigator, sometimes it's a little hard to get things onto the schedule, but we're glad you're here. So let's go back to the before days. Before you were on the city council. I'm curious, as you started to think about your run for city council, what inspired you to take the leap?
Thanks for the question, and I love this question because I get to tell one of my favorite stories, and I'm embellishing at least just a little bit. But when I was on the Parks and Rec Commission, when I first got onto the commission, I really didn't know much about how cities were run or about city politics or city government. And the longer I served, the more involved I got, and the more I was paying close attention to what the city council was doing. And it was not uncommon for me to come home after watching a council meeting or listening to it or watching the video and complaining at home. So my wife would hear me complain, my kids would hear me complain. And finally, I don't remember if it was Noah or Emma, but one of them got fed up with hearing me complain all the time. And they said, "Dad, if you think you can do a better job, then why don't you run for council?" And they kind of called my bluff. I see, why not? Let's see what happens. It's something that interested me as soon as they said it, and I did some research into it, and one thing led to another, and I decided to put my name in the hat, and lo and behold, I actually won an election.
That's great. Yeah, our kids are amazing individuals. They sometimes know more than we do on these topics. So not always though. Don't get big heads about that. So you're coming up on 3 years now on city council, and the council has evolved in that time. I'm curious, how your experience has evolved from a rookie council member to soon to be mayor later this year.
So it's really been a night and day experience for me. When Sally and I were first elected to the council, things were completely different. I mean, we were in the midst of COVID. All of the meetings were being held virtually. The city manager, the former city manager, Chris Jordan, had just announced his retirement from the city after the election, but before Sally and I took office. So it was very, very different from how things run right now. We had to appoint an interim city manager, so that was kind of the first big issue that was dominating our work during my first term. There were some rough edges with the council. There was a dispute between one council member and a member of the public, and it was quite honestly, looking back now, it was very confusing and very hard kind of to get my feet underneath me. But over the past 2.5, 3 years, I think that things have smoothed out. We made an excellent choice, I think, in our hire for city manager. And Gabe England coming on board as a city manager has really helped to smooth a lot of things along. Coming back to in-person meetings, I think, has also helped a lot. It's frankly, for me, it's easier and better to be able to see and talk with my colleagues face to face. I think that helps smooth things along and really get to a more efficient and better way of running government.
Oh, that's great. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about the challenges that are in front of us right now, and I'm curious what you think are some of the bigger challenges facing Los Altos right now.
I think one of the biggest challenges we face that not a lot of people are really talking about yet is all the deferred maintenance that we have for the city's infrastructure. We built most of our buildings, our police station, city hall, community center. They were all built in the 50s, maybe the 60s. And over the years, Los Altos has really had a policy of deferring maintenance rather than putting money in proactively. We've kind of managed our facilities until they break down. We now have a police station, which really does not meet the needs of the community, and there's not a lot that can be done to that building to make it better. We have 2 fire stations, both of which need new roofs. The garden house is heavily used, but it also has a lot of structural problems. So I think that is really the deferred maintenance that the city has experienced, I think, is really a ticking time bomb. And we're going to find ourselves in a situation where some building fails and can no longer be used, and we suddenly have to incur a very large expense very quickly. So I'm concerned about that. There are other big challenges that we face as well. I think meeting our RENA goals is very important, and it's challenging. I really believe that we can do it, and I'm not opining on whether or not it's fair or wise for the state to mandate that we build an additional 1,950 units, but that's the law, and we have planned to accommodate for that. I think that we can do it, and it's important that we work as diligently as possible to accommodate the development of those units, because that's our obligation to the state. And if we don't meet our obligations, there could be some very serious consequences, which all of us want to avoid. And I think the third big challenge in my mind is preparing the community for the next big emergency. We have a very resilient community. We have a community, I think, that cares about one another, that looks out for one another. But eventually there is going to be a disaster that hits, and it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Whether it's an earthquake or a fire or some other type of natural disaster, it's eventually going to come. And I really want to make sure that we as a community, individually, with our neighborhoods, our individual neighbors, that we're ready for that and we're prepared for that.
That's great. If I could follow up and put you on the spot a little bit. So, we all know the infrastructure, there are some challenges. Is there a plan to solve some of those issues, or anything coming up in some of the upcoming council meetings?
There's nothing specific coming up in a future council meeting that I can recall. But in my meetings with city staff, I know that this is one of the top priorities. So eventually we're going to have to start investing money in our facilities. And the question is, where are we going to get that money? One of the big accomplishments that I think the council has made this year is working with the city manager and his staff to redo the way that the city works its finances, redo the way that we budget. I know that city staff is already trying to put money away or otherwise developed certain funds that are used specifically to help to maintain our properties. But whether it's getting ready for a large remodel or replacement, or even just to do the little things, that work is underway. One of the examples, actually, which I have high hopes for, is the apricot orchard. Obviously, the apricot orchard, it's not a building, but it is a city asset, and it's fallen into a state of disrepair. And we're very fortunate that the History Museum has a committee which has taken on the task of rehabilitating it. And the city is working with the Orchards Commons Committee in order to bring the apricot orchard back to the state it was in, what, 5-10 years ago, when it really was a jewel.
Yep. In fact, last night at 6:30, I drove by and there were two guys out there. I don't know if they were putting in an irrigation line or planting a tree or something on the road between the police station and the orchard. So
I think that's the irrigation line going in.
yeah, it was encouraging. So great. Thank you for that. So let's get a little insight into how you go about your business. How do you prepare for council meetings? What sorts of things do you do? Do you talk to people? I'm sure you read a lot, since those packets can get pretty heavy, but maybe talk about your process for each council meeting.
I read a lot, and I take notes, and I go back and look at my notes. I ask questions. Before every council meeting, all the council members get to submit questions in writing to staff, and the responses to those questions are published usually by about noon or 1 o'clock the day before a council meeting. And it's nice not to just get responses to my questions, but to see what my colleagues are thinking as well. Beginning usually Thursday and Friday night, when the packet comes out, I'm going to start my work then. I mean, my Friday nights are not what they were when I was back in college and I was enjoying myself. But my Friday nights now, especially the week before a council meeting, they're busy. They're at work. Same with my weekends. So I read a lot. I try to read everything through at least 2 times. And then I ask questions, and I seek out people that have information that is going to help me. Some of the issues that come before the council are fairly straightforward, and you can put in a reasonable amount of time just with the packet, maybe do a little ancillary research as well, and you're ready, you're able to contribute in a competent way. Other areas that the council looks at require a lot more thought and a lot more consideration. For me, license plate readers, the policy, whether or not to allow license plate readers in the city, and if we did, what our policy would be. That's something that took a lot of time. I had planned to spend about 2 or 3 hours doing some outside research from what's in the packet. And that actually turned into more of a 20 or 30 hour project. I mean, there's a lot more material out there than I thought that I thought I was going to find. There are really conflicting views onto whether license plate readers are useful, whether they are legal. I mean, there's a lot of issues with them that I was not prepared for when I first got the packet and read through it. And then I talked to people. I talked to people in the city who really wanted them, who were concerned about crime in the city. I talked to people who are concerned about how license plate readers have been used to violate civil rights. I reached out to different people to get different thoughts and different input, and that's what it took to be able to contribute to that discussion the way that I wanted to.
It's great, and I'll just emphasize for those on the recording and live, that Q&A that comes out every Monday before a Tuesday council meeting. It's a little hard to find, but it's on the city's website, and it has anonymous questions from all the council members, and then the staff answers to each of those questions. So it sort of provides the context and reading between the lines for some of the stuff that's in the packet. And I always try to seek it out, Monday night or Tuesday morning, just to see what's going on. So that's super helpful.
And let me add one more thing, but public input is really, really important to me when I'm getting ready. I do read all the emails that people write. I really do. I reply to a large percentage of them. I'm not able to respond to everything, but emails that come in usually by about noon the day of a council meeting, I will have read them. The day of a council meeting is very, very busy for me because I'm rereading everything. I'm going over my notes. I'm preparing for how I want to contribute to the meeting. And at some point, I just have to stop going into my email and answering phones because I have to focus. But I really do appreciate when the public gives me input, especially when people are giving me input who I may not agree with. It's very easy to find, I don't want to say my group, but it's easy to go to supporters or people who are writing in and saying, yeah, I know I'm on the right track. But as a representative, what's important is that I'm also taking into consideration opposing viewpoints. We're looking at things differently. I'm not a zero-sum type of a guy when it comes to politics or even law. Sometimes zero-sum, that's the reality of a situation. But a lot of times, especially when it comes to government policy, there are ways of sort of looking outside the box, so to speak, finding creative solutions. But even when that's not possible, I want to make sure that at the very least, I have heard the arguments and the concerns of people with whom I disagree, so that I understand where they're coming from. It's important. I think that residents are entitled to that from their elected officials. And frankly, I think it makes me a better policymaker.
Agreed. Thank you. What has surprised you about serving on the Los Altos City Council?
So I had a very Pollyanna-ish perspective when I first got elected to the council. I thought, this is great, there's 5 of us, we're not always going to agree, but we're always going to want the best thing for Los Altos. And that's true. All 5 of us do want the very best for Los Altos. We simply don't always agree on what is in the best interest of the city. I did not take into account when I first got onto the council really how much politics and the decisions that we make affect people's lives. And because people's lives are affected by the decisions we make, it can become very emotional and people become very passionate. I was not really ready for that. I did not expect that when I first got onto the council, but I've come to have a very healthy understanding of it. What we do matter. Elections matter because the decisions that policymakers make matters. It does affect people's lives. And because we're making decisions that are going to affect you, I mean the public, you're going to want to have input. And when the council makes a decision that you don't like and is going to result in a building built that you don't want, or a traffic light put up somewhere that you think is going to interfere with your peaceful enjoyment of your home. I mean, these things matter an awful lot. And I really have a lot of, I understand the passion that people are coming to the council with, and I have a lot more respect for it now, I think, than I did when I first got elected.
Great, thank you. And we've touched on this a little bit, but in traditional Los Altos fashion, there are always, multiple viewpoints on virtually every issue that we could imagine. And how do you ensure you're getting out of your echo chamber, your group of trusted, friends and advisors, and getting input from, as you said, people that you might actually disagree with on your positions?
I think part of the job of any policymaker is to take a step back and think about an issue from a broader perspective. I was not elected to make the decisions that are in the best interest of Jonathan Weinberg. I was elected to use my best judgment, to educate myself, and to make a decision that's in the best interest of the city of Los Altos. I'm not everywhere in the city. I own property in one part of the city. I rent property in another part of the city. But there are areas where I need to get additional input. And in order to do that, I've got to take a step back. What's the issue that we're considering? What are the effects going to be? Why does this matter to people? And then it's incumbent upon me, after I do that initial analysis, of being open to having people come to me to give me their input, but also for me to reach out and say, hey, I know this is an issue that might affect you. Can you take some time to talk with me and sort of explain it to me from your perspective? I want to understand why you're looking at this issue from a way that maybe I haven't come at it before.
Great. Thank you. So later this year, you'll be transitioning to mayor if all goes as planned. I'm curious what your expectations are for the role as you've seen your colleagues make that transition in recent years.
Well, I feel that I'm really lucky because Sally has done an excellent job as mayor. And frankly, I want to follow in her footsteps. I mean, Sally's values as mayor, as I see it, are to make sure that we have an opportunity for thorough discourse on an issue. We're using our time efficiently. Sally very much tries to drive consensus, make sure that everyone has a chance to be heard, but keep the meetings moving as well. We are very, I think the city is very fortunate that this term we have a city council that, in my opinion, is very respectful, is collaborative, and is transparent. By my sort of unofficial count, last year, we had 14 or 15 major votes that came down to a 3-2 vote. And this year, the year's not done yet, but this year, by my official count, we've only had one issue that came down to a 3-2 vote. That's not including abstentions. That's including just people who vote yes or no. That's huge. And I don't think it's because, oh, well, everyone's the same person. There's no diversity of opinion on the council. I don't think that's true at all. I think that we have had a lot of conversations on that council with people who do not agree with one another, but were willing to work collaboratively to get a good policy, even if it meant part of that policy didn't include everything that they wanted to see in it. So what I have seen Sally model as mayor is what I want to continue next year. I want those same results.
That's great. Has Sally let you in on any, secret perks that the mayor is entitled to when they get into the role, or is that still top secret?
Yes. Oh, yeah. The biggest perk is a huge devotion of time that you have to put into getting ready to be the mayor. All the a lot more emails, a lot more demands on time. That's really exciting.
Well, and we know you're a working professional, and so can't imagine the time you spend now, and it's only going to go up in the coming year. So thank you for that investment. We really appreciate it. So I only have a couple more questions here, and then we'll turn it over to the audience. But if there's anything you could ask of your constituents, what would it be?
It's a great question. I think more than anything else, I would like my constituents to remember that we are a community. We succeed together when we work together with mutual respect and transparency and open-mindedness. We will accomplish great things. Compromise is not a dirty word. Compromise, I think, is an important part of moving a community forward. And when we all keep in mind that we're in this together and we want to work together, I think we come out with very good results. I would also like my constituents to remember that the city council sets the city policy. It's really important to be kind and gentle with city staff, with commissions, with the people who are doing the day-to-day work of keeping the city moving. If the city staff is implementing a policy that a constituent doesn't agree with, be gentle with staff, because they're merely implementing the policy that the policymakers, that the city council has put into play. And my constituents have every right to come and let me know when they think I'm making a bad choice. That's part of the job of being a politician and being an elected official. We all have the ability, and I would say the responsibility, to let our leaders, our political leaders, know when we think they're making a mistake. That's totally reasonable. And again, I get the passion, I get the emotion, but be gentle when talking to staff, be gentle when talking to the people who are just following through on the city council's policies.
Sounds good. So I think we're going to wrap up. Any closing thoughts or final remarks before we switch over to the audience Q&A?
I can say that being a member, being elected to the city council is one of the greatest honors of my life. I really have enjoyed and continue to enjoy being a representative of the people of this community. It matters to me. It's really awesome when I'm just kind of sitting somewhere quiet, thinking that my peers, my fellow residents, have entrusted me to represent them and help make sure that the city moves forward in a positive way. It's really challenging, but it is, like I said, it's an incredible honor to be here, and I will never forget that. And I want my constituents to know that it does weigh on me, and it is important, and I do appreciate it.
That's great. I had occasion yesterday to look at the list of former mayors of Los Altos, and it's amazing to go through that list and see some of the people who really helped move the city forward over time, and some of the lions and lionesses of Los Altos. So your name will be on that list hopefully soon. So
Thank you.
thanks.
And it's daunting. I think it's fair to say that a lot of respects, Los Altos has kind of punched above its weight. We have a history of some great leaders who have accomplished great things.
Sounds good. All right. Well, why don't we switch over? Thank you for a great conversation, and we'll open it up to attendees. Please raise your virtual hand if you have a question, and just a gentle reminder that one question per person, and then no speeches, please. So let me switch this over to gallery view. We can all see each other. And does anyone, here we go. John, you have a question. Go ahead.
Thanks so much. This has been really interesting. I was just curious, Jonathan, since you talked about complaining or about things on council and then getting involved. And so I think when a lot of people outside look at some city processes, whether in Los Altos or other communities, they don't understand why do certain permits take so long, or why do certain processes take so long. And I was just wondering if there was anything you would share that was kind of like an eye-opener from your perspective once you switch from that kind of external role to being on council, and kind of any insights that you would share.
Sure, John, thank you very much for the question. I think a challenge that a lot of people have in understanding government is realizing that government is designed to move slowly. People coming from the private sector, and I include myself in that, my clients don't want me to move slowly. They want results fast. There are strict deadlines. Time is money. You resolve a problem as quickly as you can. Government doesn't do that. Government is designed to move slowly so that people can be involved in the process and to make sure that everyone is treated the same. So someone who puts in an application for a permit, obviously it depends on the type of permit, but say a building permit for a brand new house. That there are a lot of factors that go into determining whether or not plans for a house meet the city standards. And those standards are available, and we have and we continue to move towards form codes, towards objective standards, which I think is a great idea. But it's a process that requires time at the ministerial, at the staff level. And again, it's to make sure that all the rules and regulations that are in place to protect all of us as a community we need to make sure that all of those rules are complied with. And that's why things can move slow. It's not because government is inefficient. It's not because government doesn't care. I mean, of course there are ways of making government more efficient. That's not a question. But the political process, and that includes the ministerial approval process, is designed to move slowly to make sure that everyone's interests are being represented and things are done correctly.
Thank you.
All right. Harry, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Joe. And thank you, Jonathan, for being here. My question really relates to the slow government. And the emergency preparedness volunteers were very excited to hear that the importance of emergency preparedness to you as you hopefully will become our mayor next year. And one of those slow projects is getting the community center transition to be our emergency operations center if needed in that pending disaster when it happens. So that the volunteers keep thinking that's going to get implemented, and we thought it would be implemented by now. So when is it going to be done? And the hams, the amateur radio operators, have also asked to carve out the first piece of getting the antenna cabling and antennas up so that we could respond there even before the whole thing is done, because we operate on batteries. So when is it going to be done, and what can you do to get it done?
So I don't have an answer for you in terms of the timeline. What I can do is try to poke a little bit. I'll certainly talk to the city manager about it on your behalf, and it's something I was planning on doing anyway. I've been in contact with Janet Tam of Nolan Tam, the architects for the community center, and now for the EOC. So I can talk to her about it as well and get back to you with any information that I have. Next week, I was invited to be an observer. I think Cal Water is running a drill on their emergency preparedness, and it's at the community center. So that's an all-day drill that I'm going to be observing, and hopefully I'll be able to get some insight into it then. I will try to poke around and get questions answered for you. I won't promise that I'm going to put my finger on the scale to make it go faster than it otherwise would, because I don't know what the other constraints are. But I do share your concern that this is really important, and while no one may be paying attention to it day by day, if and when the big emergency hits, we want to make sure that we have the facility needed so the bats and the hams and resilient Los Altos can do their job to help protect the community.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Gary Hedden.
Congratulations, Jonathan. The city got approval from HCD on the housing element.
Thank you.
That's a big accomplishment. My concern is that HCD is all about the numbers, getting some affordable housing built, which is important. There's no disputing that, in my opinion. But what is the vision? What is your vision for how this should be done? For me, it would be walkable, bikeable neighborhoods with easy access to a grocery store, a nearby park, and tree-lined streets. Imagine that. So, and the goal then is to make it possible to get to these things without driving a car. And that's really, for me, what it comes down to. So what is your vision?
Well, Gary, thanks for the question. And of course, I agree with that vision. There are things that we can do to help make it a reality. Right now, there aren't a lot of public transportation options in Los Altos, but that can be changed. I do sit on the policy advisory committee for the VTA. If and when we begin building more and denser housing, there's going to become a bigger need. to have bus service along Foothill and San Antonio. I know that Pat Burt, the mayor of Palo Alto, and I think it's actually the chair of the VTA as well, he has been championing having a new bus line going up and down San Antonio. Having public transportation options available is going to facilitate, I think, the desire to build more affordable housing, denser housing, and when that housing is developed, to make sure that people are taking greener options and everyone getting in their cars by themselves. I think that the city is in the process of doing what it can to encourage people to ride share and to have electric vehicle charging stations throughout the city. Certainly there's an opportunity for us to do a lot more with respect to charging stations, but we already have them downtown. We do have them at the community center. And I think as more and more electric vehicles are hitting the road, you're going to see more and more electric vehicle charging stations throughout the city.
Great. Adine Miller.
Good morning, Jonathan. Thank you. I'd like to point out, Jonathan, is class of 19 for lead. There's a number of us here, so go lead.
Good vintage.
Jonathan, yes. Jonathan, you're going to take leadership on the presumption of the mayorship in a very interesting moment in our, I would say, national kind of flavor around democracy. And as we saw with the last sort of significant election cycles, there's a lot of discourse, civil discourse that deteriorated. What role does the city council, what role do you play in helping set the tone for what will be an intense period of time for us?
Thank you for the question, Aiden. It's a
Adine.
Great question, and it's really a question that should be asked, I think of all political bodies. What the city council can do is model good behavior. And honestly, I think that we're doing that. So, like I said earlier, I believe that we are a collaborative body. I believe that we are a respectful body. We are able to compromise and reach unanimous or near unanimous consent on most of the big issues that are in front of us. And it's not because we're all thinking with the same mind. It's because we look at each other, we listen to each other, and we respect one another. And sometimes you have part of a policy you want that two other council members aren't willing to agree with. Politics, you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. But how we treat one another, I think, really matters. And that doesn't mean that there isn't going to be disagreement. That doesn't mean that council members themselves aren't going to get emotional and voices will get raised. That's okay. That's part of being a human being. But when you're at the end of a process, you make a decision how you want to move forward. And when you work collaboratively, when you decide that out of your own sense of self-respect, you want to move forward in a positive way out of respect for the process, that's when you're able to model the behavior that you want the rest of the country to follow. The city of Los Altos City Council is not going to affect what happens in Congress. And it's too bad. We can all look at what's happening there, and I think nobody is happy with all the bickering that's going on right now and the extreme partisanship. But just because Congress is acting that way, it doesn't necessarily follow that we have to be that way. It's not what Congress is doing is not what I want the Los Altos City Council to do. And quite frankly, it's not what I want my kids to see. And my kids are not watching the city council meetings, but someday maybe they'll put on a YouTube. I don't want them seeing their father and their father's colleagues bickering and being angry and getting into personal diatribes. It doesn't help anyone, and it's not why we were elected. We need to model the behavior that we want to see in others. That includes my constituents, that includes political leaders who are higher up the food chain, includes my kids.
We've got about 5 minutes left, so get your hands up if you haven't already. Liz, I'm sorry I didn't see your comment in chat, but go ahead with your question.
Okay, good morning, Jonathan. I am interested in what is the current status of the dog park? Wednesday's town crier had a really good letter from David Smith about please don't take away any more parking from the library. So I'd like to know, I don't know where the council stands on that right now.
So the council's position is a dog park is going to be constructed at Hillview, and it's going to be constructed where that little parking lot nook exists. That vote happened, I think it happened over a year ago. So that is the council's policy, and there's been no change in that policy. Park and lieu fees are being used to develop the dog park, and it's my understanding that the city has already hired topographical analyst. I forget exactly what the title is, but a preliminary study is being done with respect to the geography, the topography of the area in order to plan a more permanent dog park. Now, as part of this process, we do want to preserve as much parking as possible. And the elimination of that little nook does not necessarily mean that all the parking spaces are going to be taken away. There may be a way to keep the same number of parking spaces, or at least preserve some of them. And if you think about it, even if that nook is taken away, where there's now going to be a curb, or there's now a driveway, I mean, we'll be able to put parking there. I think there are other solutions that we can look at. We can have parking places that are dedicated for maybe families with young children, older adults, people who absolutely need the park as close to the library as possible. Speaking for myself, I'm keenly aware of how popular the library is, of how important the library is. I mean, in general, libraries are they're a key component of a healthy society. They are a place where people come together and meet, where ideas are shared, where students study. I mean, libraries matter a lot. And I don't want to do anything that hinders the library. But at the same time, the dog parks have been a success. There's a demand to use for people who want to use a dog park. And that little parking nook was the most logical place to put a dog park. I will say one thing that I don't really like is some of the people who are complaining about a dog park taking away parking spaces in that little nook. They didn't have a problem when Friends of the Library had a big portable there that was taking away, I don't know, 6-8 parking spaces. I never heard anyone complain about that, but I am hearing complaints about it because there's going to be a dog park. So that rubs me a little bit the wrong way.
All right, and I think our final question goes to Janine.
Hello, Jonathan. Thank you for showing up and giving us these great answers. My question, it doesn't relate to your current tenure. I'm just basically going to ask, after you're done with the city council, what are your political aspirations beyond that?
I don't know. I don't know what the opportunities will be. I have not thought that far ahead. It's a conversation that I would have to have with my family before I could give any kind of a meaningful answer in public. I'm not thinking about if I can or what I would do or where I would want to move up. I am focusing on what I can do for the city of Los Altos. That really, I know it sounds cliche, and even people who are thinking of moving up will probably say the same thing, but truly, I have a career. I like being a lawyer. I have a good career. I'm a partner at my law firm over a year ago. I've got opportunities to contribute to my community outside of politics. So when the time comes for me to explore that, then I will.
By the way, Janine, is that an Oakland Roots shirt you're wearing today?
Me?
Very nice. No, Janine has the Oakland Roots representation. So great. Well, I'd like to thank Senator Weinberg for a great conversation today, and few announcements before we head out. I realized I didn't discuss this with the steering committee. I hope you'll indulge me, but there is going to be a celebration of life for one of the Lions of Los Altos, Roy Lave, coming up Friday, September 22nd from 4 to 6 p.m. at the Los Altos Community Center. So wanted to make sure people knew about that. Our next meeting will be Friday, September 22nd as well. Same time, same channel, 8:30 a.m. And we'd like you to join us for, in light of last night's Planning Commission meeting, a discussion about the Los Altos zoning changes that are being implemented from the housing element and housing requirements in Los Altos with Los Altos Development Services Director Nick Zorns. So there was a lively conversation last night, and one of the things I learned was just how far we have to go to be able to reach all of the constituents, because I can't tell you how many community members I spoke with who had never heard of the housing element, did not know what builder's remedy is, et cetera. And we're wondering why the city of Los Altos is building 250 apartments at Rancho, which is not the case, by the way, just for clarity. But I think it'll be a timely discussion given the conversation that has really taken root in the community recently. If you'd like to be added to the LACC mailing list to get notifications about these meetings, please send an email to info@losaltoscommunitycoalition.org. Kim posted that in the chat. Thank you, Kim. And as always, a huge thank you to the Los Altos Mountain View Community Foundation for providing LACC with financial and in-kind support. Thank you, Adine. We really appreciate it. So Jonathan, thanks again for a great discussion, and we'll see everybody in a couple of weeks.
Thanks so much, everyone.